formulas. My name is David Carnes. I own a consulting firm based out of Boston in the United States. I have a team of about 70, and I've watched Salesforce grow across the last 17 years. It's been incredible to watch this ecosphere just grow and grow. I'm very proud to be part of the MVP program, and I'm a new user group co-leader. Do we have any user group leaders here? Okay, two, fantastic. I need a lot of advice. I also host a group called Dashboard Dojo, where we talk about reports and dashboards twice a month. So when you're creating reports, when you're creating dashboards, always keep in the back of your mind that formulas can solve challenges that you have. Okay, just always keep that in the back of your mind. If you get stuck and you can't do something with the native reports and dashboards, just keep that in the back of your mind. So what will we talk about today? We'll talk about the what, where, and why of formulas in reporting. Then we'll talk about row-level formulas, summary formulas, cross-block formulas. How many of you have created a cross-block formula before? No? So you need to build a joined report first. When you build a joined report, you can have up to 5 blocks, 5 reports, and you can create formulas across the blocks. So I'll show you some examples of that. Finally, if you can't do something with a row-level formula, a summary formula, or a cross-block formula, keep in the back of your mind that sometimes what we need to do is create a custom formula field. So a really good example of that is when you want to use that formula on many reports. Instead of creating it on every report, you might want to create a custom formula field to use in your reporting. So we'll talk about each of these. All right, so for the what, where, and why. So a formula is an algorithm that derives its value from other fields, expressions, or values. I know you can read. That comes from Salesforce Help. When we're creating formulas, we're combining literal values, we're combining field values, we're using functions. So functions do the heavy lifting when you're writing formulas. Earlier this year, Salesforce made 2 major changes to formulas in Salesforce. They gave us an additional 22 functions. Woo! So functions, you can get things done with functions. They also allowed us to triple the complexity of our formulas. So when we think of complexity in a formula, we're thinking of how many nested ifs can we fit into the formula. So we're given 3 times as much complexity. When we're writing formulas, we also take advantage of operators, and we can include comments. Sometimes it's helpful when writing a formula to just comment out something so that you can test it, and then you uncomment out, and maybe it's broken now, so that you fix that thing. So here's an example of a formula. This formula looks at a date, and it says, regardless of the date, give me the last day of the month. So it's hard to see on the screen, I have the close date here, and then this formula is creating the last day of each month of the close date. This formula starts with an if function that says, if it's the 12th month, we know what to do. It's 31/12 of the current year. So we create, using functions, that December 31st of the current year. However, for every other month, we're doing something interesting with this here. We're saying, go to the next month, to the first of the next month, subtract a day, and we can determine what is the last day of that month. So this is an example of a simple formula, well, it's a little complicated, to solve the problem, what is the last day of the current month. So when you're writing formulas in reporting, we have a nice formula editor that we've been given. We need to, when we create a formula, we need to specify the output type. So we can have text, we can have dates, we can have numbers, and depending on the settings in your system, you can also have currency. We can take advantage of the Fields tab up here and the Functions tab. So we have the list of all the fields available on that report type. And then we have a list of functions tucked behind it. A little secret in writing formulas in reporting is that there are more functions available than are in that list. So if you look in help, there's a list of all 100 functions. You can use more than are available in this list. The same is true here. It's hard to see, but the list of operators, there are only 7 operators here, but we know from writing formulas that there are about 15 or 20 operators that we can use. So we can use more than this list here. So when we write our formula, we write it here in this editor. We have type ahead, so if you start typing if, it will show you the syntax. We have the color coding. They've done a really nice job with this formula editor. When they introduced row-level formulas, they introduced this formula editor, and then they upgraded the other formula editors for summary formulas and crossblock. When you're writing a formula, there is a button down here to validate the function. This does not test your formula. This does not tell you whether your formula does exactly what you want. What that validate button does is tell you whether the syntax is correct. Is it a valid formula? You still need to test all of your formulas. And the last thing to mention is this little link here for help. So please take advantage of the documentation within Salesforce. All 100 functions. There are examples of all 100 functions, and they're good examples. So for the if function, for example, one of the examples is nested 5 ifs. Like, that's the example I want. That's a good example. All right, so why do we bother talking about formulas? Well, there's all kinds of things we want to do in reporting, such as to calculate a win ratio, calculate a projected amounts, or do a month-over-month percentage growth. I'll show you examples of each of these 3. We can do, for service and support, aging of cases. We might also look for specific text within a report. For marketing, we might look at conversion ratios. There are other needs we have in reporting to take advantage of formulas, such as concatenating fields, changing data types. I do this one a lot. I use row-level formulas to change a data type so that I get it the way I need it in reporting. You might also use a formula to highlight anomalies in the data. A really nice thing you can do is take advantage of emojis and have your formula output show an emoji when there's something wrong with the data. We can modify values, we can compare values across groupings. We can also compare values across blocks. These 2 examples here, there's a pre-group val function and there's a parent group val function. I'll show you both of those. All right, so that's the why. Let's take a look at row-level formulas. So these allow us to evaluate individual records. These were just introduced maybe 3 years ago. So in my Salesforce experience, the 14 years before that, there was no way to do this. You had to create a custom formula field on the object that you wanted the formula. Now we can do it directly on the report using a row-level formula. We can have one of these per report. The result of the row-level formula is displayed as a column, and you can see here I've got my emojis, and I have a row-level formula that says if the case of this particular case is, if the priority of this case is high, show the angry face. If it's medium, show the less angry face, and if it's low priority, show the smiley face with sunglasses. You'll have to trust me, that's what that is. But when you go to add a row-level formula, we can see to the right of the columns, we have a down arrow. We can select Add Row-Level Formula. If that's grayed out, you must already have the one you're allowed. So if that is grayed out, so it's very easy to add a row-level formula. These can be grouped, these can be filtered. We cannot, however, use these in bucket fields or cross filters. So let's do a challenge. Somebody posted this one in the Salesforce Report and Dashboard chatter group, and they said, management needs to filter dashboards based on the month of a sales opportunity closed. So if it's January, it doesn't matter the year, they want to see all the January deals. If it's February, they want to see all the February, if it's March, and so on. So it was a little bit of an unusual request, but I thought, aha, formulas will help to solve this. So what I did is I created a row-level formula on the underlying report, and this says if the If the month is 1, make it January. If it's 2, February, etc. So basically converting the close date into months, text. The reason I needed to do that is because on the dashboard, the only way to do a month filter is to actually have the text of the months. So this is the plumbing that connected the two. So I have a dashboard here that says, right now it says if it's March, and I can see in my results that it's just showing March data. So it's kind of an unusual example, but you don't think of needing a row-level formula to solve a dashboard problem, but sometimes we need to do that. So in my system, just to show you this one quickly, and this, of course, closed a moment ago, so I will find it again. Well, here's the dashboard anyway. So I've got my dashboard with my March data. And if I change this to January, it'll just show the January records and so on. But the only way that this was possible was to set the text filters here, and then in the underlying report. So what I've done is I've grouped the close dates into the month of April, etc. I'll just show you the formula. How is that zoomed in? Okay, so again, it's in the case of the opportunity closed month, if it's 1, January 2, February, and so on. So this is how I solved that challenge. All right. So for summary formulas, these are summarized at the grouping or grand total level. We can sum, min, max, average, and then 2 newer ones. We have the ability to do a unique. And as of this year, we can also have the output be a median. So we now have 6 choices of the output of a summary formula. We can have up to 5 of these per report. They cannot reference each other. You build it one time on a report, and it's on that one report. So in the example of a win ratio, all we need to do is take the one sum and divide it by the closed sum. So I have an opportunity report of all my closed opportunities. All of the ones that are won and all the ones that are lost. That's all I have on that report. And I divide the number of won by the number of closed. And when you create a summary formula, you have the ability to have your output at all summary levels, the grand total only, or we can say just do it at a particular group. And you can see here that I've applied conditional formatting on that as well. So we can have conditional formatting on the output. So I thought to show you an example of who is our best sales rep. So some of you in your organizations, it may be the person who sells the most. Some of you in your organization, it may be the person who wins the most. In another organization, it could be who has the biggest deals, who has the largest size deals. Well, we can actually use multiple data points and use a scatter plot. This is probably this is the type of chart that people avoid because it feels complicated, but they're very powerful to show correlations in data. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot the win ratio, and then we're going to compare that with the average deal size, and we'll get a sense of who's our best sales rep. So I have that in here. So what I have is that simple formula for the win ratio. And again, it's just the one sum divided by the closed sum. In this case, the output of my formula is percent. I have 2 decimal places, and then I can set the display to be all summary levels. But if you don't want it at all levels, you can set it at the grand total only or specific groups. Sometimes when you're creating a formula, you don't want it at the grand total, so we can turn that off if we wish. But I'll go ahead and run this. So this is an example of a joined report. So I have one block showing me my win ratio. I have a second block just showing me all the won deals. So this is a block with won and lost deals. This block is just won deals, and I have an average amount. And then we can use the scatter plot to determine, I think it's Evelyn Wilson. So Evelyn has a 90% win ratio and a much higher average deal size, so she might be our best sales rep. even though this person has a higher win percentage, he has a lower average deal size. So it's kind of an interesting way to compare and determine that. So there are two very powerful functions that a lot of people avoid when writing formulas in Salesforce: pre group val and parent group val. So these are available when you write a summary formula, and they're super powerful. So this pre group val, what it allows you to do is, if I have the sum of the amounts by month, so I have June, July, August, and I have the sum of the amounts, what I can do in a formula is calculate what's the difference. So from 7.1 to 13.6, the difference is 6.5, and so on. So this is a month-over-month change, and I can also do it more math and say, what is the percentage change as well? So here are the examples of the two formulas. So for the month-over-month change, I've just got the amounts, the current month, the current groupings amount minus the previous groupings amount. And this one's a little bit more interesting to do the percentage, but we can figure that one out. With parent group val, this is another function that's available on summary formulas. This is really great for saying, I want to know if the record count in Q2, that looks like, is 7. What percentage is that 7 of the total? It looks like it's 107, so that's 6%. And I do that by using the parent group val function. And you can see here, I'm just saying, take the row count divided by the parent group val of the row count of the close date. And this is how I can do that type of comparison. All right, let's talk about cross-block formulas. I'm really excited to talk to you about cross-block formulas. I want you all to go home and try cross-block formulas. You can combine up to 5 reports on one report. You can put them all together. You have a common grouping across all 5 report blocks. But if you do this, you can actually have up to 10 cross-block formulas. In addition, you can have up to 50 summary formulas. So cross-block formulas are kind of amazing in what we can do essentially mathematically. So cross-block formulas cannot reference each other. Their purpose is to calculate values across the blocks. So this is a little hard for you to see, I'm sure. But essentially, we reference each block with B0 is the first block, and B1 is the second block. Again, we can have up to 5 blocks on a cross-block formula. So we just need to reference which amount are we talking about. It's the B0 amount that we're talking about. So just to show you an example of this, like why would we do this? Well, maybe our board of directors wants another data point to compare our forecast to. Maybe our sales are terrible and our salespeople are terrible at forecasting. So they want another data point. Well, what we could do, we could use that same win ratio, and we could multiply it by the open pipeline to get a projected amount. This is obviously pretty simple, but we can do the math across the blocks. So we can see that here. I have my win ratio, I have my sum of the open pipeline, and then I'm projecting. So I'm multiplying this by this to get this. So in my example here, I've got my win rate again, just that simple little formula, the one sum divided by the closed sum, just to show the win rate. And then down below, I have my cross-block formula, which is the projected amount. And it says B0 hash 1 sum divided by a B0 closed sum. And we can multiply that by the amount to get the projection. So let me show you that as it's run. Well, we can see the outputs here. The scatter plot will draw when it's ready up above. But again, I like to use a scatter plot. Scatter plots are great when you're working with a joined report, because this will show you the correlation between a data output here and a data output here. So again, we could do similar to the last one, based on the win percentage, the win ratio multiplied by either the sum or the average, the projected amount, and show that on the scatter plot. Okay, so the last thing I just thought to mention, keep in the back of your mind that formula fields are still very useful. One big reason is that they support cross-block formulas, so we can actually use a cross-block formula when I create a custom formula field, and I can reach up to 10 objects, grab a value, and bring it back in and use it in my formula. That's super powerful. We can't do it with a row-level formula, a summary formula, or a cross-block. Another thing that's pretty powerful, I don't use it a lot, is we have these special data fields here, such as the API, the profile, the user's role, and we can use those in our formulas as well. In order to do that, we need to create a custom formula field. So this one here is actually using the opportunity score, which comes from Einstein. So the Einstein opportunity score, we have the amount, we have the probability, we have the expected revenue field. Why not do the same thing with the amount, the opportunity score, divided by 100, multiply it by the amount, and then have a projection based on Einstein. So to do that, I just said, if it's 1, show the amount. However, if it's closed, show 0. Otherwise, do the math. Take the opportunity score from Einstein, multiply it by the opportunity amount. It's a pretty simple formula. And that might be a good example of one you build as a custom formula field. All right, let's wrap up. So I mentioned Dashboard Dojo earlier. We meet at noon New York time, which is 5 o'clock here in Casablanca, which is maybe not too late. But we meet twice a month, once or twice a month. We also record everything. So there are about 35 hours of recording. We've done 5 sessions on formulas now. If you're interested in learning more about formulas. And you're very welcome to join. It's just a friendly group, anyone who wants to come. So we've now had 2 years with this group. It's been a lot of fun. Another thing to mention, there is a blog that's called reportforce.blog. So one of the writers is sitting right here. So Aaron Creer is a writer of this great blog where it's like really good examples of stuff. So he and Evan Ponter put that together, another great resource. Okay, so I want to reiterate this idea that when you're creating reports and you get stuck, your manager's yelling at you, get this thing done, and you just can't think of how to solve a challenge. Keep in the back of your mind that formulas can often help get you out of that jam. Any questions before we probably have 1 minute? A couple minutes?
I do have one. It's regarding the dashboard solution that you described.
Yes.
So when you actually build the filter on the dashboard, can this be like kind of dynamic? Or
Yes.
do you still have to type like in January,
No,
February,
it's
etc.?
such a good question. So when you create a dashboard filter, you can say hard-coded dates. You can use relative dates, this quarter, last quarter, this month. But that particular example, the only way I could figure how to say January and February was to do the formula that I mentioned. But you're right, it's such a nice thing to be able to create the relative dates within a dashboard filter.
I'm so happy because you're like fixing a problem that I had for many, many months.
Oh.
Because we reached the limit of on the filters of dashboards. And we didn't know how to solution that. So we have our business Carnes waiting for us. And that's amazing. We never thought about it.
So another thing to share with you is in the report and dashboard roadmap, the number of filters will go to 5, but only for unlimited edition.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions before we're out? Well, I wish you good luck with your formulas.